Because when you understand that each individual you're talking to, each group, each audience has a specific listening that's different, you start to ask the question, okay, what's the listening I'm speaking into? Now that is a question which unlocks all sorts of goodies.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Keynote Curators Podcast. I'm Seth Deckman, your Keynote Curator. And today we're going to be diving into the science of sound with Julian Treasure. Julian, welcome to the podcast.
Seth, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
Julian, this message of yours delivered through your new book and your updated keynotes is, I think, more prescient, more needed, more than ever in the air. And I'm just really excited to not talk about speaking, but talk about listening, which I think is kind of where your focus is these days. And, for our audience, if you've ever wondered why your message isn't landing or how to just be heard or how to hear the message properly, tune in and tune up, because Julian's approach is going to help you cut through all this noise, metaphor and pun intended. You're teaching, you're reading, you talk about reading and writing, that we're taught to do that, but not listening or speaking. What would you change if you could flip that script?
Well, I would definitely start by teaching children how to listen. I mean, if you think about it, how crazy is this? If we taught children first how to be brilliant listeners, how much more of their education would they receive? And as it is, we have kids who aren't even taught that this is a skill. Guys, listening is a skill. It's not the same as hearing. Hearing is a capability, listening is a skill. So children conflate those two things and they think everybody just listens. I just listen, that's what I do. No, listening is something you can practice and master and become very, very good at, which has got huge advantages. First of all, to how you learn. Pythagoras in ancient Greece used to erect a screen in front of the teacher so that his first-year students, who he called akousmatikoi, could not see the teacher, on the basis that seeing the teacher was distracting from the real business of learning, which, of course, is listening. So listening it's the primary way we learn, and we don't teach it. So this is madness. We spend all this time on sending education. How good is the curriculum? How good are the teachers? And then we sit children in dramatically awful acoustic environments, in classrooms with hard surfaces, with reverberation, with noise, and so forth. And we expect them to receive their education when half of them can't hear it and the other half aren't listening anyway. So we need to start asking, how is the education received? Not how good is the sending, but how good is the receiving? What a difference that would make in the world. And of course, if we taught children how to listen and they grew up as listening adults, we'd have a very different society, wouldn't we? So, yeah, I would change that immediately. Speaking, yes, I mean, in your country, it's taught a lot more than it is in mine or in many others. It varies country to country. But, the speaking skills, I think most people understand a little bit that speaking is a skill. Nevertheless, of course, I'll be, in about 2 weeks, I'm speaking to 2,000 CEOs in Copenhagen. And I can tell you what will happen. I always say, how many of you use your voice at work? And for how many of you is your voice really important? A forest of hands will go up, because they all speak in public or do media or stand in front of teams or whatever it may be, stand on stages. How many of you have had formal vocal training? About 3. It's just like, what?
Right.
What is going on? Guys, if the voice is important, train it. So, but they do know, I think most of them know that it's quite an important skill. And a lot of people know they don't have it. Hence, my TED Talk on speaking became so popular. But it's been seen by 5 times as many people as my TED Talk on listening. And a world where we all want to be heard, but nobody's listening, that does not work very well, does it?
It's so interesting, to hear and to listen. 2 separate words, 2 separate meanings, 2 different actions. And one is a capability, as you say, and one is something that you can develop, acquire. It's a muscle. It's a skill. There's so many different ways I want to go with this conversation. I was having a nighttime conversation with my daughter, and you know, I I put my hand on her and I said, "Let's just quiet down the voice in your head." And she said, "I can't." you know? So we did a little breathing and we did a little conscious breathing. And I said, well, just first listen to what it's saying. And I don't want to turn this into a psychotherapy session, but somehow this is connected because what I find, and I can speak from my experience, I'm no expert on this like you, Julian, but our listening isn't an empty vessel. We're coming in with this already always kind of listening. You're
Mm.
speaking, and I already have ideas about what listening is or what education is. I was a teacher, I was a student. How do we, land that plane for me? How do we govern that, or how do we manage that, or how do we do it optimally to
What you've
intervene
hit
on
on.
that in that voice in our head that's always mammering?
Well, there's two things here. So, can we talk about inner listening in a moment, which is
Sure.
listening to the voice in the head? First of all, you've hit on, I think, one of the most important parts of my work, certainly, which is the idea that every human being's listening is unique. Now, it's a huge fallacy that most people have, that everybody listens like I do. And when you get that, it makes a massive difference, particularly to your speaking skill. Because when you understand that each individual you're talking to, each group, each audience has a specific listening that's different, you start to ask the question, okay, what's the listening I'm speaking into? Now, that is a question which unlocks all sorts of goodies. Now, why is everybody's listening unique? Because we listen through a set of filters, and those filters include the culture we're born into, whether that's family, tribe, city, region, country, whatever it might be, politics, whatever tribe you're in, whatever culture you consider yourself to be part of, that shapes your listening, the language you learn to speak, the values, attitudes, and beliefs that you pick up along the way. So, to this conversation here today, here we are, Seth, you and I, well, we picked up different values, attitudes, and beliefs along the way, and those color our listening. And then in any given situation, you may have intentions, what you want to get out of this. You may have assumptions about what's going on in the other person's head, particularly. You may have emotions going on. You may have expectations about what's going to happen. All of these things color your listening, and it is not fixed. It changes through the day. Your listening is very different 9:30 in the morning to what it is at 11 p.m. at night, to what it is just after you've eaten. You and I, professional speakers, will often get given the graveyard slot just after lunch. They
Right.
can, they know what they're doing. They can cope with that. And that's where everybody's just eaten and all the blood's gone to their gut and they're all a bit groggy and sleepy and a bit slower. And you have to work harder. And, if
Yeah.
you don't recognize that, oh, that's the listening I'm speaking into now, you won't adjust your delivery, your pace, your content, whatever it is, to match the listening you're speaking into. So it varies from person to person and audience to audience, and it varies over time. So it's a huge mistake to think everybody listens like I do. You go around just speaking to yourself the whole time. And that's what a lot of people do. And it's not very effective because these listening positions, which is what I call them, that's the kind of the set of filters that you have, they tend
Yeah.
to ossify. They get set in a
Right. They
particular
get
way.
hard. They get hardened.
Yeah, they do. And they tend to leave us in a listening position, which is not very variable, where we listen to from most of the time to other people. And there are different listening positions. And it's the most liberating thing to realize that all my life, I've been listening in this bunker I've made,
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
little slit at the front. And,
Yeah.
and all that's made of my opinions and values, attitudes,
Yeah.
beliefs, all that kind of stuff is the concrete of that bunker. And it's only letting certain things in. There's a door in the back of the bunker. You can leave it and go explore. And that is wonderful when you start realizing, hey, I can challenge those filters. I can change them because I'm conscious of them now. And you can start to listen from different places. So there are lots of, spectra of this. You could say, let's say critical listening, which is what we do a lot in work. What's in this for me? Is there anything of value here? How do I rate this? Kind of critical
How is it
listening.
useful? How does this apply?
Exactly.
Where does it work for me?
Exactly. Whereas
Yeah.
if you're at home listening to your daughter who's just had a big upset at school, that is not where you want to be. You want to be an empathic listening, going onto her island, feeling her feelings, opening your heart, and really connecting on an emotional, spiritual level with somebody. Well, that's not necessary at work most of the time. But, being conscious of that, being able to move your list and just ask yourself, where's the best place I can listen from? Well, these are two very powerful questions that we've just encountered now. What's the listening I'm speaking into? That's about other people's listening, which you can't change, but you can spot it. And the other one is, where's the best place I can listen from in this conversation, which is very powerful also.
But I would take the case that where I'm listening from requires even more of that variable, that agility, that being ever more present. I believe the conscious listening is what you're alluding to. Is that accurate? Is that the phrase that you
That's the phrase I use all the time, conscious listening.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about active listening and so forth. Yeah, doesn't do it for me. Conscious listening, now that does, because I think this is all, to be honest, a conversation about consciousness. It's about being more present, more here, more with the other person. And it's pointing in a completely different direction to the society we live in now, which wants us to be less and less conscious and present. There are huge organizations spending billions trying to get our attention and trying to get us doing 9 things at once, buying things off them the whole time. Well, that's the opposite of what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is being with somebody fully.
I think that, it strikes me that conscious listening is more holistic, albeit active listening is maybe more one directional or more constrained. These are words. I don't want to litigate and semanticize it, but frankly, Julian, we both work in a world of words. I mean, every human does, but specifically, in the keynote speaking business of booking speakers and giving presentations like yourself and writing books and doing consulting, words matter and words are important. And conscious listening to me really captures it in a broader but more at the same time precise way. You said a couple of things that we grew up differently. We have different values, and then there's the time of day. That there's so much there to unpack, and I just want to chime into our audience here, who are conscious, are listening in a conscious manner. This is why we come to our podcast and have great conversations like this one with Julian. So first timers, thanks for being here. The ones that have come back, we really appreciate you continuing to come back. Comment in the show notes where it is that you're in a bunker with a little slit, or you found the back door, or a little bit of both, and what those moments were. We'd love to hear from you. I want to. I don't want to make it about me, but heck, it is my podcast here, Julian. I was listening. We recently had an astronaut on, and we were talking about other things, and those are people that also need to listen very carefully. But I want to talk about silence and the no noise, no speaking, and where that plays in all of this, because astronauts, whether they're on their way to the space station, they're on their way to a planet, they're in orbit, they're training, there's a lot of quiet and silence. How does that play into all of this?
Silence is a very, very important sound. In fact, the whole last chapter of my new book, Sound Effects, is about silence. It's the gaps between the words that make the words make sense. It's the gaps between the notes that make music. So without those gaps, it's just all noise. And unfortunately, we now have more than half of humanity living in cities. And cities are generally pretty noisy places. There's a table of the noisiest cities in the world in my book as well, in the chapter on human sound, or anthropophony, as you could call it. And some of the noise, I think Dhaka in Bangladesh is the noisiest, averaging over 120 decibels. That's rock concert loud.
Average.
Constantly averaging, it means it's going to go louder than that from time
That
to
means
time.
that it's been, oh my goodness gracious sakes alive. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, most people don't understand the decibel scale, and I'm sure you do, but every change of 10 decibels is a doubling or a halving of the volume level, of the sound level. So 80 decibels is twice as loud as 70 decibels. 100 decibels is 4 times as loud as 80. And 120 decibels, now we're getting into ridiculous noise levels, which, you'd be shouting at the top of your voice. That's rock concert loud, really. So when you're living in a place like that, constant noise, we know, first of all, noise is very bad for people, that kind of noise. It causes increased risk of heart attack, stroke, all sorts of issues, dementia, terrible issues. Lack of sleep builds up over time. It's costing billions and billions and billions. I think in the US, the estimate is something like $300 billion a year is the cost of noise. Wow. Well, that is a major issue. You never hear a politician saying, vote for me, I'll make it quieter. It just doesn't happen.
Who's on board? Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. So noise is a really big issue. It's hard to get away from it, but it's important to do so. Even if you live in a noisy city, try and get 3 minutes of silence twice a day, because it recalibrates you. It gives your ears just that little rest, and it gives you the baseline back. Silence is the baseline for all sound. And that's where we listen. It's the start of listening is silence, really. So, if you have to lock yourself in a broom cupboard or a bathroom or just a quiet bedroom, this is the reason for the rise of lovely practices like Shinrin Yoku, forest bathing, which is becoming hugely popular around the world, where people are going out from the city in groups and just walking in forest and listening, not talking to each other, just listening to the beautiful sound. So reconnecting with nature, because sadly in cities, we're disconnected from 2 very important sets of sounds. One is silence, which we need as our baseline, and the other one is nature sound, wind, water, and birds. We've been Homo sapiens on this planet 300,000 years roughly, and before that 3 million years of other hominid type things evolving into us. And for all of that time, bar the last maybe 300 years, we've been surrounded largely by nature sound.
Yeah.
Only recently, with the rise of machines in the Industrial Revolution, have we increasingly created more and more and more noise and drowned it out and lived in more and more in cities where there's no nature anyway, largely. So those 2 things, they're very damaging for us, and they put so many people into a stress situation. So we're already fatigued, stress, high cortisol, high noradrenaline levels in our bodies, making us ill.
Inflammation,
autoimmune. Don't get me started on the range of illnesses and effects caused by noise.
You can get started. That's why we're here.
Unfortunately, it's very difficult to turn the clock back. It's like trying to stop technology. It's not stoppable. There's nobody who can say, let's just pause for a moment with AI and think about it for a couple of years before we push the next green button. No, everybody's rabid at it, and it's going to do what it's going to do. Help us, hurt us, whatever. So, the same with noise, and it is largely a function of population growth. There's more than 8 billion people on the planet now. I can't believe, I went to India back in about 1982, I think, on a honeymoon in my first marriage. And I think there were about 600 million people in India now. There's getting on for 2 billion people in India now. It's absolutely incredible how the population is growing. And that creates just noise, population density, people doing stuff and not listening. This is the other thing about listening. If we're listening consciously, it allows us to take responsibility for the sound we're making and take responsibility for the sound we're consuming. So I've got 2 great exercises for you and your listeners here. One is the exercise of 3 minutes of silence twice a day. That is really important and really good for you. And the other one is an exercise I call savoring, which is where you can start to take responsibility for the sound you surround yourself with. So in every room that you spend time in, bedroom, study, work, wherever it might be, close your eyes and ask yourself 3 questions as you listen. Is this sound healthy? Is it good for me? Is this sound helpful? Is it actually helping me to do what I want to do in this space? And the third question, they're all H, so it's easy to remember, is it making me happy? Ask those 3 questions, and if you get a no to any of them, change it. And then you start to design and to do what I call soundscaping your life, creating sound around you that's actually happy, healthy, and helpful.
I gather that the energy and the gray matter that's required to absorb, mitigate, deal with these sounds that aren't making us happy or aren't useful, that the energy that it takes to absorb it or be numb to it unconsciously also has that negative impact on our autoimmune system and the cortisol and the body inflammation and all that. Is that true?
Yeah, there's lots of knock-on effects you can isolate like that. I mean, give you an example. Lots of organizations use masking sound, and typically what they'll deploy is filtered brown noise or pink noise. Everybody calls it white noise, but it's not white noise. It's brown or pink. Colors of noise, it's just names. It doesn't actually have a color, but pink noise is more what we would discern as a sort of just a regular background sound. It's not too high pitched. White noise would be way higher pitched. And you have it on in the background. And after a few minutes, you lose contact with it. You stop noticing it. However, the research shows that is fatiguing. There's a part of your brain that's going, I'm not listening to that. I'm still not listening to that. I'm still not listening to that. Right. And you do that all day. So the feeling when the air conditioning goes off at 6 o'clock or something, everybody's shoulders go, oh, I didn't even know that was going on. And suddenly it's decent here now. Totally. So we can absolutely habituate to a constant noise like that, but it's not good for us to do so. Yeah. Now, there are much better alternatives for masking sound. I was involved in the launch of a company called Moodsonic a couple of years ago, which is doing very well out in the world using biophilic sound. That is nature sound, largely water, wind, birds, those kind of beautiful sounds, which it turns out not only are good for us, research now piling up showing us that it's good for us, restful, relaxing, not restful in the sense of sending us to sleep, just calming, but it can be stimulating neurally as well. So it's very good for working. Also, it can do a pretty good job at masking unwanted conversation. So it's a much healthier version of the pink noise that people have been using. So yes, I mean, that kind of soundscaping is so powerful and so important, and we need to pay much more attention to the sound we're surrounding ourselves with. Partly also, I have to say, and this is what a lot of my book is about, is because sound is bloody wonderful. It is amazing. In the book we've got things from the sound of snapping shrimps, who are about the size of one digit of your finger, and when they snap their big claw, they create a sound that's 150 decibels. That's 4 times louder than the loudest rock concert ever recorded. Now, admittedly, that's recorded right next to it. Nevertheless, it's very loud, and they use it to stun their prey. And there's a little flash of light in the bubble they create a bubble that then collapses and creates this pop. And there's a flash of light when it does that, which scientists have calculated is 4,000 degrees centigrade, which is the temperature of the surface of the sun. That's a pretty mighty little shrimp, I think. So there is amazing sound like that. There's the sound of blue whales, subsonic to us, which can travel 1,500 kilometers across the ocean to another blue whale, or at least used to be able to do that before we deafened them with 60,000 ship movements all the time. Now they're down to 1/10 their previous range, which is tragic. We've even got a recording of the sound of a black hole, which is the spookiest sound you'll ever hear. It really
What does that sound like?
Oh, well, if we don't have too much noise cancellation, I might just be able to play you that. I think yes, I've got one here. Let's see if this gets through noise cancellation technology. Hope you're getting that. It's a very spooky sound. And it's obviously not something we'd hear if we were out there in space. It's vibrating a gas cloud. This is a black hole at the center of the Perseus galaxy cluster, which is vibrating a gas cloud around it. It's making real sound. It's just too low for us to hear. So NASA pitch shifted it up into the human audible spectrum. And that's the sound you get. It's a really, it's what I would think a black hole should sound like, very eerie and spooky.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's another good reason to listen, really. Sound is wonderful. Sound is amazing. It's extraordinary. And if you start listening, it's opening a door to a whole new dimension to your life that perhaps you haven't really been paying any attention to until now.
Yeah. I mean, what comes to mind is the sound of the waves crashing, how relaxing and how, I'll use the word nutritional it is, and how naturally we're drawn to it. Oh, and even these sound, at night you can have the waves crashing or rain falling, and it's all nature based, and it's all basically what you're talking about, that these are things that reduce the stress, reduce the cortisol, reconnect us with these natural sounds, as opposed to I'm not listening, and the energy and the fatigue that it causes in shutting
totally.
that kind of stuff down.
And different sounds have different effects on us, because sound affects our bodies, our minds, our feelings, and our behavior as well. So there are very powerful effects of sound on us, which again, I talk about in the book. So, for example, if you're a speaker and you're a really dynamic speaker, then you'll want walk-on music that's pumping, high tempo, exciting, full of dramatic moments and so forth. That wouldn't work for me, because, I'd have that coming on. Everybody would be whooping and hollering in your country anyway. And I'd come on and go, hello. And
Right.
no, that's not hang right, is it at all? I'm a very calm speaker. I'm centered and calm, and I speak well, but I'm not a whooping and hollering kind of guy. It's not me. So we all have our own style. And it's very important to give yourself, when you think about your personal brand, you can think about the sound of that as well. I mean, I did 20 years of audio branding with an audio branding agency until last year. And that's all about, how does your brand sound? So as speakers, we need to think about that. How is our voice?
Yeah.
What's the music that we might use, or the sounds that we might surround ourselves with in our brand, in order to amplify it and express it more fully and accurately? It's got to be congruent. And that's something that so many people get wrong with sound. They have incongruent sound. Whether it's, you spend millions designing a supermarket that looks fantastic, and then it's just full of buzzes and hums and clashes and bangs and, oh my goodness, checkout beeps. Get me started.
Yeah. It sounds like a bunch of random instruments being thrown down a staircase.
Exactly.
Or
Exactly.
something to that effect. What brands or businesses or organizations do you see that have done an effective and even, really appealing use of sound as part of that brand strategy, or as part of an example or a symbol of who they are?
Well, you can think of quite a few. And I mean, I've got a couple of examples I can probably deploy here. If I do this, did you get that one? I'm not sure if the noise suppression app is going to let these through. So the old, everybody knows that now. It's a very, very simple sonic logo. It didn't take much composing to create two knocks, and it came from obviously a program that was iconically Netflix anyway. But there are plenty of others. Not many people could draw Intel's logo, but most people can go da 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 da, which of course meant Intel inside. So it's a good mnemonic and a brilliant piece. It was one of the first really powerful sonic logos created by a guy called Walter Wazawa. And it For anybody who's musical, that is first to the fourth, first to the fifth, which is how most symphonies happen. It's the basic fundamentals of most music. And he got it in 2 seconds. So that's quite clever. So, yeah, there are organizations like that. You can think of McDonald's, you can think of all sorts of sonic logos that surround us now that we're very familiar with and which are doing very well. A lot of organizations still have not thought about it at all. And they spend all their time and money on the eyes. We live in a very ocular culture. So hence the reading and writing thing at school, hence the fact that architects train for 5 years and they might spend 2 days on sound in that 5 years. I mean, that to me is completely shocking, but that's the case. Because if you're an architect and you want to win a prize or win the next contract, how do you show your work? Pictures, graphic
Visually, yeah.
walkthrough, visual. Nobody ever says, how does it sound? So we end up with these buildings which look fantastic and sound, whatever the opposite of fantastic is that you're thinking is what I'm thinking too. And, they are unbearable. They're actually not fit for purpose, whether they're schools, offices, where noise is the number one problem, hospitals, where noise is 12 times the recommended maximum level. And that is devastating for people trying to get well. You name it. It's just all around us, this visual obsession and not listening. So I'm on a one-man mission, basically, Seth, to get the world listening again. That's what the book is about. It's what my New Online community is about. And for however many years I've got left on this planet, that's my mission now, to generate listening in the world.
It's a great mission. I'm on board. I'm a member of the community, and we're going to put everything we can. Again, I'll refer to our show notes and on your speaker profile on our website that will foment and support and spotlight your mission. It is, I could listen to you all day. Truly, this is a subject that fascinates me. We're coming to the end here. Sadly, it doesn't mean that it's over, because we can listen to this podcast later over and over again. But in the beginning, we talked about how you used to talk about speaking or speak about talking, and now it's moved into listening, which is there's more of a need on your assessment, and I concur with that. The classic observation in my mind, I don't know if it's classic, but I'll refer back to the astronaut we had. Recently, there were some astronauts that were on the space station for longer than had been originally planned. And NASA reported as such that the mission has been extended. There have been some instrumentation problems and some more scientific, some problems with technology, and they had to extend the mission. Well, what did journalists hear? They were stranded. Even they used the word abandoned. And on a guttural, like the most, I'm a pretty pedestrian thinker, Julian, but that kind of irked me. I'm a little bit of a closeted NASA nerd. And I was like, they weren't stranded. First of all, every astronaut goes up before they go, that anything can happen. On the way to the launch pad, their suit could malfunction, and that's it. It wasn't like they got kicked off the trip. No, there was a suit malfunction and things have been delayed or postponed or canceled, Is that a kind of a valid example of a little bit of what we've been discussing and what I've been hearing from you?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the, what I call the 7 deadly sins, this sort of constant hyperbole, the intensify of everything, which happens in our language all the time. Once upon a time,
everything is breaking news.
Once upon a time, it was okay to be excited. Now you have to be super excited, don't you? It's no longer good enough. Soon we'll have to be hyper excited or mega super. Right. I don't know.
Turbo excited.
Exactly. So we are kind of, we've got an inflation going on with language. And I think that's a bit sad, because once upon a time, words like fantastic, amazing, wonderful actually had meanings. Now they just all mean good. And so we've lost a lot of the fine meanings in our language, which I think is a bit sad, personally. It's a lot. I'll give you another exercise. Here's a challenge to everybody. Try for a day saying exactly what you mean without the verys, reallys, amazings, hyperbolic sort of exaggerations. It's really difficult. It is really
Yeah.
difficult to do that. But it's a very good exercise because it brings you back again to a kind of still center where you're present to what's real and not having to amp everything up and be more intense. We get addicted to intensity in our culture, and
Yeah.
that is a really big problem. And so I think that kind of being still, again, reconnecting with silence, being real, that's a great place to be.
I have so many questions, and I truly, this is the last one. I don't know if it's a phenomenon or a movement or a trend or a tendency, but you're seeing in the zeitgeist sound baths. What's
Mm.
your take on that?
Well, sound has been used for thousands of years for healing. And just as a lot of our pills these days are distilled from herbal remedies that people have known about for a very long time, and indeed, tragically, many, many people have been burned at the stake or murdered or, killed
Yeah.
as witches and so forth for using them over the years. Well, we discovered that, yes, actually, that leaf does have something in it. And if we put it in this little white pill, it all becomes very scientific and medical, and everybody's happy with it. I have to admit to a suspicion that the same thing will happen with sound. We're 50% water. Water's a very, very good conductor of sound, much better than air. It travels 5 times faster and much further in water. So I would be, and every bit of you is vibrating, from the atoms to molecules to cells to large parts of your body, and of course your brain, which is vibrating all the time. I'd be amazed if external frequencies did not have quite profound effects on us physiologically at levels we don't understand yet. So I'm very open-minded about that, Seth. I think, sound healing, sound bars are very pleasant. So, it's like that ASMR stuff, which I don't, set much store in. Is it ASMR? I always get those initials wrong. If
I'm
it
not
works for
familiar.
you, if it's, it's some kind of gentle sound, you can get thousands of videos on YouTube that do this. And it's supposed
Okay.
to do something to your brain and make you, happier. Or it's like binaural beats, where people have marketed these for years as, turning you into a Buddhist monk in 5 seconds. No, they won't do that. But if you like them, if they're nice for
Anybody
you,
knows it takes 10 seconds. Anybody knows it takes 10 seconds, not 5
yeah.
seconds. I mean, come on.
Took you that long, did it? Wow. So yeah, all of these things, I think we're all very individual. Just as we said at the beginning, everybody's listening is different. Everybody's body is different. There are probably people in the world who work at their very best to loud death metal music. Not me. I couldn't do that. But we're all different. So people always say to me, what's the best sound for this, that? Test things out. See what works for you. Maybe these kind of sounds do. All I can say about sound baths and that kind of sound healing stuff is that it's always very pleasant. So I have a nice time if I do one of those. Whether it makes me healthier, I don't know. I'm not that sensitive, perhaps, but I'm sure there's something in sound healing that we will discover in due course.
It's kind of what's going to be unconcealed, right, from our view,
Yeah.
getting out of the bunker there.
Yeah.
Well, I think on that note, getting out of the bunker is a good point of departure for us from this episode. I just, it's been great. It's been fascinating. Your new book, Sound Effects, it's with an A, correct, not E.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
we will also include that in the show notes, and just we will join your mission here to bring conscious listening to the world. And we know how much of a difference it makes here. We appreciate you taking your time, Julian, across continents, across time zones, and just being with us and sharing your passion. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Seth. I've really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. And to our listeners and viewers as well, thank you all. We appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you next time.